Welcome to MMAYHEM TV. My name's Christian. This weekend on the Gold Coast, it is going to be a massive event. The final of the Ultimate Fighter Smashes season, season 17, Australia versus the UK. Now in the welterweight division, it'll be Australia's Robert Whittaker taking on Brad Scott of the UK. And the final of the 170 pounds division, Norman Park takes on Colin Fletcher in the All UK final. But of course, the main event will feature the two coaches from this season's Ultimate Fighter season, Australia's George Sotiropoulos taking on Ross Pearson of the UK. Now, Australian fans love George Sotiropoulos, and there is no doubt that Ross Pearson is a favourite son to those in the UK. But Ross Pearson's last two fights have actually been at featherweight, and his record is 1 win, 1 loss. Nothing to write home about. George Sotiropoulos, well, he was on his way to being a contender in the welterweight division a couple of years ago after his masterclass in Sydney at UFC 110 against Joe Daddy Stevenson. But the last 2 years have been very, very disappointing for George Sotiropoulos. Back-to-back losses to Rafael Dos Anjos and Dennis Siver. One thing I am fascinated about, and if anything I'm actually quite nervous about, is George Sotiropoulos' career hanging by a thread. He needs to win this fight so badly that it has turned an otherwise pretty ordinary card, in my opinion, into something that fight fans in Australia won't want to miss. George Sotiropoulos has to win on Saturday night against Ross Pearson, or as I said, his career in the UFC is pretty much gone. This to me is one of the biggest fights in Australian MMA history. Go George, we're with you all the way. My heart says, mate, you're going to do it, but my head says that Ross Pearson will overcome George Sotiropoulos, and unfortunately that'll be the end of George Sotiropoulos in the UFC. I hope I'm wrong though.
Move of the Week.
As usual, I'm joined by Professor Jason Robic from Axis Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu on the Gold Coast. This week, we're going to demonstrate a move that isn't one of the more flashy, but definitely adaptable to wrestlers such as Matt Hughes. This is the Kimura.
Okay, so we're going to start with you on your knees. We'll do the Kimura from the guard. Okay, so let's do like a lockdown. The guy's here, protecting himself. And usually he's going to have his elbows like locked in. So it's very difficult for me to access the Kimura from here. But what I'll do is I'll move myself out up onto my elbow. Now typically what this guy needs to do is start to push me back down. So as he does that, he presents the arm more. So I'm going to wrap this arm over the top, close the grip. See, there's no space in between here. As I close the grip, this leg here is going to come in and trap his leg on the other side. This leg goes over and cuts down on his back. So it makes it difficult for him to sit up. Problem is, if the guy's really strong, it's hard to use this with just my arms. So what am I going to do? I'm going to hip escape out and use my body with the hip escape to bring on the Kimura.
Well, in the coming weeks of MMAYHEM TV, we'll certainly be keeping an eye on some of the local MMA competitions throughout Australia and indeed other countries. Last week on the show, we mentioned the AFC, the Australian Fighting Championships, who had a big event in Melbourne last Friday night, AFC 4, with a stacked card featuring two pretty big main events, one of which featured former UFC heavyweight Sean Big Sexy McCorkle taking on Australia's own Soa Palalay. And Sean McCorkle, of course, his nickname Big Sexy, he might want to change his nickname to Big Bouncy or Big Slammy because Soa Palalay picked up the big American in the first round and slammed him into the canvas. It was pretty much all over from that point. It was a devastating victory for Soa Palalay. Sean McCorkle didn't know where he was, but he did give credit to his opponent after the fight. Now, word out of Melbourne was that Dana White was keeping a very close eye on this event. In fact, he was watching it in the very early hours of Friday morning, American time, streamed live on the internet on epicenter.tv. And with this amazing result for Soa Palalay, word is that he could be well on his way to being the next Australian to make his debut in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. We'll certainly keep a very close eye on Soa Palalay in the next few weeks on MMAYHEM TV. Well, that's it for this week's show. Next week, it'll be our pre-Christmas special on MMAYHEM TV. We'll go through some of the big events from the world of mixed martial arts for 2012, and I'll also give you my Christmas wish list for 2013. We'll catch you next week on MMAYHEM TV. I'm Christian. Thanks for watching.